I've been the luckiest guy going for the past, wow, almost 40 years. As I began knowing the first speakers in the National Speakers Association, beginning with the founder, Cavett Robert, and the first president, Bill Gove. And we dug back in the recording archives and found an interview done with those two people back in 1976 or so. And then the real exciting part has been watching the emerging speakers. So I was able to corner Joel Weldon and Patricia Fripp, who were both just beginners when we all met the stars, Cavett Robert, Bill Gove, and others. And then as my time as EVP of National Speakers Association, I was able to work with 9 different fantastic guys that were our presidents. So this is all going to be followed by a snapshot you'll hear of me talking about those people at my retirement lunch from NSA. So I hope you enjoy. Well, it's hard to believe since the day we first met, Ms. Fripp, 1977. I won't say how old I am, I'll just say how I've known you, and that'll have to suffice.
Good.
I'm your senior, there's no question.
Definitely.
I want to first thank you for being a part of this, because I'm excited about this historical set of CDs that were first recorded in my company studio in 1974 or 5 with the iconic Bill Gove and Cavett Robert, with Joel Weldon, who all three ended up being honored with the highest award of Toastmasters International. And now you and I are going to talk about what they were like to you. I knew them a little earlier than you did. I was in awe. I'd never heard of professional speakers. I didn't know they had professional speakers. And I was in total awe, and it's hard to say how much I cared for Bill Gove and Cavett. And from a speaking standpoint, Bill Gove was clearly my #1 mentor, and Charlie Jarvis, who we'll mention a little. So, what are your first recollections? You met them both in 1977 at the Arizona Biltmore, and as you progressed through the years and became the first woman president of National Speakers, oh, I was so happy. What are some of the things you just think about when you think of them, and things you might have learned from them or their impression? Because they adored you, because you were this cute little thing, fresh off the bus. Well, it was really an airplane. From San Francisco, starry-eyed, because you had just heard shortly there before about national speakers.
Well, Bill, let's put this all into context.
Yeah.
I, of course, came over from England at age 20, knowing that everyone in America was rich and the streets were paved with movie stars. And in 1975, I opened my first hairstyling salon and started traveling nationwide for a hair product company, doing seminars. And at that same time, to help me build my business expertise, one of my friends said, you must take the Dale Carnegie sales course, which I liked so much, I thought, well, I will take anything else that Dale Carnegie offers. Took the public speaking course, the management course, and one of my friends said that now that you're speaking, you need to join Toastmasters so you have a place to practice on a regular basis. And I was lucky because I joined Cable Car Toastmasters, which was held in the IBM building, and we had several members from IBM who in those days, the people who really got promoted were the great speakers, and they had quite a lot of experience, because a Toastmaster club is as good as the evaluations and the advice that you get. From my seminars for hairstyling, then my executive clientele would say, oh, come speak to my Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, Lions Club, Optimist Club. And I realized that people who heard me speak came into my salon. It was not unusual to speak at one of my clients' breakfast meetings, and at lunchtime there would be 3 new clients in my stylist chairs who had heard me that morning. They thought, well, if her stylist cut hair as well as she speaks, it's worth trying out. So when I first went to the National Speakers Association, where I met all 4 people that you mentioned, it was because in 1976, I had, with my friends from Dale Carnegie, been to a John Hammond, Cavett winner, past president, one of his events at the Masonic Auditorium. And I saw Og Mandino, Bob Richards, Chris Hegarty was the opening, and I think it was those 3. Well, we raced out and we bought all the books. And one of the books was The Fine Art of Doing Well, which was a contributing chapter book. And several people mentioned the National Speakers Association, which I circled. Didn't think much about it again until my same friends from Dale Carnegie, we flew down to Los Angeles to attend a PMA rally. And Don Hudson was the MC. And he said, a lot of you are asking about speaking. If you're interested, leave your business card in the booth and we'll send you information on the National Speakers Association. Now, I think he got a little flack for doing that, but that is how I got the information sent to me. And I turned up at my first convention, 1977, at age 32, thinking no one's going to want to talk to me. I only talk to Rotary clubs and hairdressers. Now, to put this again in the context of professional speaking, I had earned, outside of hairstyling, where I got paid quite well for my weekend seminars, $175 as a speaker, $50 from the Oakland appliance dealers, and $125 for the San Mateo School District. And being this young, cute thing, as you said, at age 32, I walked into lunch and there were 3 men sitting at a table. And I said, may I join you? And they were very gracious. There was Art Fettig, who was a very well-known Toastmaster, big promoter of Toastmasters.
Michigan.
Yes. Battle Creek, Michigan. Then there was Paul Sturgeon, who was a trainer in the insurance business, and Ty Boyd. Well, Ty, of course, is Cavett, past president, very well-known speaker, and was a television celebrity. After that luncheon, 2 things happened. One, Paul Sturgeon, sitting at the lunch, he said, oh, I'm running this program called Speak to Me for new speakers. Would you like to be on it? I mean, talk about putting together programs at the last minute, not at all like the conventions now. But I thought, sure. When I walked out talking to other of my new friends and people I met, they said, you know who you're having lunch with? Ty Boyd is very famous. And this is a lesson for us all, Bill. If I had known Ty Boyd was famous, I would not have had the confidence to say, would you mind if I joined you?
Yeah.
And at that first Speak to Me, it is the only time in my life I remember my knees violently shaking. I mean, violently shaking. And I did the first 15 minutes of my Rotary Club speech. And 2 things happened. One, that's when I got the image and the vision that one day I could actually do this. And 2, Mike Frank, past president, Cavett Award winner, came up and said, you are the best woman speaker I've ever seen. Do you have a card? I said, no. Well, a month later, he called me and booked me to speak on a program with Dr. Robert Schuller, the minister from Garden Grove, to 2,000 people. And so when people call and say, would you give me an unbiased opinion if I should join NSA? I say, you cannot get an unbiased opinion from me. I am very biased because I would not really have the career or wouldn't have created it as fast if it hadn't been for NSA. And that's the background. At that first convention, Joel Weldon was the convention chair. Charles Jarvis was a real superstar, and so many of us would literally sit at his feet in the alcoves and the bars or the lobbies, hanging on his every word. Bill Gove was on a luncheon program, and I so remember him talking, making fun, saying, some of you, there's a rumor that I can be a little profane at times. I remember saying something like this, but he was very, very funny and so comfortable and natural, even when you knew he was doing bits of content. It looked like it was just coming out. Cavett, of course, being the founder, was so welcoming, and anybody who ever met Cavett would have the same experience. He had the ability of making brand new speakers feel that they had the potential to be the greatest speaker in the world.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That was his trademark.
Yes. Now, what I learned from all of them, so one, what I learned from Cavett, apart from the graciousness, was to put together presentations in a way that you absolutely held the overview of your presentation in your mind. You knew exactly where you were going. And your vignettes, you knew well enough that every time you told them, they would be exactly the same. Because as any student of speaking knows, Bill, to get the right words in the right place with the right rhythm is not easy. It takes work. And once you have it, don't mess with the formula. The idea of, oh, I'm just going to stand up and let the message come through me, really doesn't work, because under pressure you will ramble. So I learned from, and plus the graciousness and the humility, and the fact that Cavett never wanted a leadership role proved he was not doing this for himself. He wasn't doing it for his own ego. He was really doing it to make the pie bigger for everyone. Now, Bill Gove was totally different style, but also a master storyteller. Two specific techniques which I use and have taught other speakers from Gove. One, when you have your introduction written, really set up your opening story. Because part of his introduction, the last line always was, and if Bill doesn't tell the story about Billy Jr., I will never forgive him.
Yes.
So as Bill walks on stage, and he always said, as you are walking on stage, you have to think, I am so excited about what I have to say, and I can't wait to tell you. That's the thought you have as you walk up. And Gove was one that would literally start talking as he's walking on stage, and he would start with this story, but it looked as if he was being spontaneous because of the last line of his introduction. What I have said in the past is being natural is an act. You have to make it look natural, but it really is technique. And that won't forgive him if he doesn't tell the Billy Jr. story was a technique, but it made it look spontaneous. And once you start spontaneously, you're already in the flow. And the second lesson was adding dialogue to stories. Ron Arden, great speech coach, always said the spoken word, the written word is for the eye, the spoken word is for the rhythm. He said that. I don't know if Gove actually said it, and maybe he did, but he really, his greatest compliment was when he said, Fripp, your speech was so good, I could dance to the rhythm. And he talked about putting dialogue in your story, which now I know and teach. That's what makes a story, is tell it through the characters. And the specific example he gave was, I had a classic story, I don't tell it anymore, but for years I told it, about when I went to San Quentin prison and met Froggy, who was in for armed robbery and kidnap, no chance of parole. And Froggy said to me, how long have you been in America? I said, 12 years, which was true at the time. He said, oh, that's how long I've been in England. And I said, well, what did you do? And Gove said, what you need to say is, he said, I gave your young lady a ride from Dubuque to San Luis Obispo. And I said, that doesn't sound bad. He said she didn't want to go. Now, what I used to say before was he was in for armed robbery and kidnap, no chance of parole. Well, he said, you got to add this dialogue. And that really transformed how I now, years later, look and tell stories and coach people to tell stories. Tell it through dialogue and give your best lines to your characters. So they were some of the lessons I learned from Cabot and from Gove. Now, Joel Weldon was the first convention chair I experienced. He was the convention chair, and we had to write in critiques or suggestions. And on the last day, he read mine, which was, he said, somebody said, do we have to wait another year? Well, now, of course, we have winter workshops and we have chapters and we have special labs, so we don't have to, but in those days we used to. But what I learned from Joel, as we all learn from Joel, especially with his classic program, Elephants Don't Bite, is that whether it comes to the logistics of the program or the program itself, it is the tiny details that make a difference. And with techniques or disciplines, often one tiny aspect in isolation, say, does it make that much difference? And probably not. But when you take dozens and dozens and dozens of tiny techniques and put them together, it takes the difference between an average program to make it good or a good program to make it great. And if that is practiced consistently with discipline, then it becomes world class. The other lesson that I learned from Joel, now in the early days I did not know how to do it. And this is a very important lesson. Analytically and intellectually, when we learn a new technique, we understand, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. However, it might take 4 or 5 years to really work out, well, actually, how do you do that? And Joel was famous for customizing programs. Still is famous for customizing programs. I've had clients who told me, oh, Joel Weldon was the best we ever had. So customized. Well, most of us do not know exactly how to do it. So how I've done it over the years, because it's not only what we learn, Bill, from these classic legends, it's what do you actually do with the information. Because we all learn more than we ever act on. And some of the ways I have learned this is go out as a mystery shopper. Become a customer. Interview industry experts. Go to clients' conferences way before you speak and talk to the real people. And find heroes within the organizations that become part of your vignettes. And the good part about that is customize stories for that specific speech. The point is universal. So that's how you develop new material that isn't about you. And then I like to interview and find out what is a day in the life of the average person. So these are some of the techniques, but I learned the idea from Joel Weldon. Now then, when we look at Jarvis, Jarvis, of course, was a great humorist, and I remember years ago going to a seminar that you organized for Jarvis on humor. And I remember at the end of it, I said, Jarvis, very interesting. Nobody will do it. And that's what you learn. If you want to be a true master, it's as Ken Blanchard said, are you interested in or committed to? And to be what Jarvis or Gove or Joel or Cavett was in your own expertise or situation, you have to be totally committed to. Most of us can learn to be a better speaker. If you want to be world class, it takes constant commitment and study and revision. So that's one question in about 45 minutes of an answer.
At this point, as we say farewell to this, one thing I like that you do, and I've tried to develop now, that you say what's great is to be remembered and repeated. And I've thought of that so much that that should be, as we're preparing a speech, that's a perfect marching order for us to have. If I can go back to you telling about, pardon me, Joel and the convention, and that was 77 or 81, I think. Elephants.
No, 77.
Was elephants?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, he delivered it.
Was,
yes.
Here's a couple of examples. I had a videographer set up to shoot him that morning at the Arizona Billboard. And Joel said no. No video. Joel, why not? Videotape is a new big deal. He said, because it will distract my audience. And I thought, wow, it's exactly what it will do. So I had the guy unplug the stuff.
Yeah, well, you know, my brother feels very much the same way.
Yeah.
And you know, so is it, let's record, let's do this. Yeah.
Well, at that convention, and this might be a good point to end this on, and then you can say a little. We used to have evaluations on a 1 to 10 scale that you fill out on the individual speakers. And when that convention ended and we had a board meeting, the board said, no more 1 to 10 scale evaluating speakers. No, they didn't tell me that day. After I reported in the newsletter or something, the scores, not naming names so much, but Joel Weldon had a 94.5 score on a 10 scale, and the speaker said, we don't want any of that anymore, because Joel's the only one. So the board instructed me at that moment, no more evaluations on a point scale. Patricia, thank you for taking me back down that road with those guys that I love all so much. And on the new album, the new Speak album,
Yes.
We're going to slip in, I'm going to talk to Charlie Jarvis, be sure it's okay with him, but we're going to slip in one of his stories also in this segment that you and I are doing, along with, they're going to hear segments by Joel Cavett and Bill Gove. And I'm going to throw in, as a little bonus, hearing Charlie Jarvis' bird story.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Patricia, thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.
What a delight. Well, hey Joel, how great it is to be together all these years, for us to have time to sit down here a few minutes. We both have a lot less hair,
What year was it? 1973, 74, when we first became acquainted with what was really our icons. Bill Gove, Charlie Jarvis, and Cabot. What are your first recollections?
Well, my first recollections of those three is very clear. And since we talked about this earlier, it was Friday, March 23rd, 1973, Tucson, Arizona, Holiday Inn, 7:30 in the morning, and I walk in for breakfast because there's a seminar that afternoon that Cabot, Gove, and Jarvis are going to do for 200 people in Tucson, Arizona. And they're sitting there at breakfast. And as I walk in, they see me, wave, because we had known each other since NSA had started in 1972. I knew them, they knew me a little bit, enough to invite me for breakfast. And I sat down with these three legends. And I was just so impressed with how excited and enthusiastic they were at 7:30 in the morning to be speaking at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then they were going on after dinner. They were like little kids in a toy box, and they were just going on about what they were going to talk about and about this audience, and especially what had happened that day, and that's why I know what date it was. And it was that excitement. And then when I think of the years that followed, because I ended up knowing Cabot and Trudy, his wonderful wife, for 25 years until he passed on. So from that time on, there was a lot of experience with Cabot. And as I think back to Cabot, probably his enthusiasm, his joyfulness, his just warmth was what was so impressive. But what lasted was not that. It was his commitment to lifelong learning. Because anybody that knew Cabot Robert in Arizona, where NSA started, at our chapter meetings, Cabot was in the front row.
Right.
With Trudy. Always in the front row, taking notes.
Yeah.
At the national conventions, front row with Trudy, taking notes. But even more impressive to me as a Toastmaster, because that's where my speaking career really began, starting in 1969 when I joined, was Cabot was a lifelong member in his speaking career of Toastmasters. And at Park Central Club in Phoenix, Arizona, he was a member until he passed on. And anytime he was in town, he was at those meetings. And that really inspired me to stay active in Toastmasters today. And now, over 40 years ago, since I joined Toastmasters, I'm an active member of my Chats Club in Scottsdale, all because of Cabot, showing me how important it was to give back and to stay active and to keep learning.
Well, it's important to note that that was the time that he won their highest award, the Golden Gavel, which so many people have never even heard of. And now with the Toastmasters, at how many members worldwide?
180,000.
Yeah. It's a little okay, so you were going then from there.
Well, then I think of Bill Gove, if we're talking about the legends. And I knew Bill for 28 years from my experience at NSA. And he invited me, of course, for this program we're doing on Speak that was recorded when I was just beginning my career. But he helped beginning speakers. He was always so joyful and happy and funny and upbeat, and the way he was on the platform was the way he was off. He was always cracking jokes and telling stories and involving people in different things. And what I remember most about that meeting in 1973 was after all of this fellowship stuff got passed and the food was finished, and he said, okay, now what are we going to do about this Watergate sentencing of the burglars? And one of them, I don't know if it was Jarvis or Cabot, said, what are you talking about? I said, well, what happened? Today is the day that the Watergate burglars were sentenced. And we've got to tie that in because everybody coming to this seminar is going to have heard about that on the news, and we've got to get this woven in some way. And that never left me, that he was always thinking, where's his audience? And of course, this was the beginning of the downfall of our President Nixon. But it was a major event. So I Googled up when were the Watergate burglars sentenced, and it turned out it was March 23rd, 1973, that morning that I was with them in the coffee shop. So he sat there sharing these things he was going to work in about this experience that we all had seen as Americans into his presentation. But probably the most memorable thing of those two gentlemen, Cabot and Bill Gove, was Cabot died at 90 years old, and Bill Gove died just a year short, 89. Until the very end, they were just so passionate, so excited about speaking. And that's what inspired me. I want to be the same way, and when I'm not, I'm never going to do it again, because I want to have that Cabot and Gove legacy in my career too. So that's my recollections.
Bill Gove, then, you may or may not know, but in St. Louis, Bill Gove had his biggest revenue day of his life, and he was about 85.
Wow.
And in one day, he made more than he had ever made before, all those years of speaking. A big event in St. Louis. It's incredible. Well, it's fun to think back, and fortunately we have some recordings like this now being made that will let us share some of that, pass down that enthusiasm, which you're sure famous as Mr. Enthusiasm on the platform. And now, what's so important is that Bill Gove, Cabot, Joel Weldon are all three the Toastmasters Golden Gavel Award winners, and they're all three the CPA Speaker Hall of Fame at National Speakers Association. And thank you for the big part you played in all of this.
Well, thank you, Bill. And I hope everybody makes it a great day.
Nito, come in. No singing and no jokes. I have a very pleasant thing to do. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow members of NSA, you've heard of a man called Arthur Rubinstein, one of this world's best musicians. One day, a television reporter walked up to Mr. Rubinstein. He asked him this question. He said, Mr. Rubinstein, are you really the greatest musician in this world? And Rubinstein paused for a moment. He said, my fellow, music is an art. It is not a science. And in art, you never become the greatest because you can always become better. You can always become greater. And so it is with our profession, is it not? And so it is with our association, the National Speakers Association. We must continue to become better and greater and achieve those things that will enable you and I to meet the challenges of tomorrow. You know that your board of directors some time back, several months ago, decided with my full support to begin to put a staff that is a full-time staff for the National Speakers Association, because we felt that would serve our purposes better than utilizing the services of a multiple management firm. Bill Johnson, who has served us long and very well, chose not to be considered for a full-time position because he has many entrepreneurial activities that he wanted to continue. So we went on the outside and found other people to fill that job. But any man who has given as much as Bill has given through the years deserves excellent recognition before all of you. And as I was thinking who might do that task ever so well, I thought of our founder, our mentor, our friend, and this morning I learned our excellent nonverbal communicator, Cabot Robert. I would like to ask you, if you will now, to make a special presentation to Bill Johnson. Would you please welcome Cabot Robert?
Thank you, Nito. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, this is an honor I'll long remember, not soon forget. Bill Johnson was a charter member of this association. 3 years later, he became the executive officer. During Bill's regime, we've grown from a little handful of people to over 1,700 members. Art Linkletter was our 1,000th member, and I believe Bob Richards was our 1,600 member. Not only that, we have grown into a financial situation where we have over $200,000. But that's not the most important thing as far as I'm concerned. We've grown from a little hesitant, embarrassed group to the greatest hugging and loving and kissing and sharing and caring group in America. Now, every organization of any success is the lengthening shadow of those who built it. Not only has Bill attended all 17 workshops and meetings of NSA, but the unique thing about this organization is that the executive support has been a family support. Bill's charming wife, Marge, and his wonderful kids, now listen, have attended all 8 national conventions. And you've seen these boys running all of them helping around so much. Bill has witnessed every event from the time that in Hernando, Mississippi, when the board met there and Don Hudson's dog ate Joe Lawson's hat. Do you remember that time, Joe? I know Bill tried to rescue it, couldn't. Up until the time that our 1600th member was Bob Richards. We have over 1,700 now. You know, they say that, you've heard it said so many times, that every organization is the lengthening shadow of those who've contributed to its growth and success. NSA is certainly no exception. The entire Johnson family helped to nourish our organization in its infancy and certainly assisted in its youth and its maturity. So I want to call Bill Johnson, if you come up here, if you will, please. Will you come up, Bill? I just want to say it's with pride and pleasure and sentiment. We got other things to do this afternoon, but I don't say I'd planned to say some affectionate things about this guy, but you have said it more beautifully than I could have said it. So if I can keep from crying, I just want to say, Bill Johnson, an appreciation for the leadership and dedication to Executive Vice President from 1976 to 1983, the National Speakers Association. Bill, we love you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Cavett and Nito. I know how Johnny Carson feels when he comes out on the monologue. Thank you for that. People ask me a lot of questions always. Of course, there's a lot of great memories over 7 years. The most emotional moment there's ever been, most inspiring, was in 1979 when we unveiled for the first time the Cavett Award statue. Those of you who have not seen that great piece, I look forward to you being in San Francisco to admire it, because the Cavett Award is a magnificent thing. That was the most emotional moment. This one's more emotional for me, but that was the most emotional of all the moments I've witnessed. Most humorous moment was when the late, great Bob Bales spent 19.5 minutes introducing our banquet speaker at the first convention. And that's when the board of directors explained to me, you don't ask a humorous person to introduce a humorist speaker. So I learned my lesson, and then some will say, well, Johnson, you forgot it then in 1977, and they're right, but I'm not going to talk about that, because I made that mistake again. The most frustrating time I had, the most embarrassing, two things have happened that were the most embarrassing over the years. The first was in my first convention we ever did off-site from Phoenix. We did a national convention, it's our first convention off-site, in Louisville, Kentucky, and when they came in the room for the opening luncheon like you did today, we ended up 100 seats short. That's when I learned that NSA members don't necessarily decide to come until the last minute. And Gail, this is probably the only society I know of where you take your registrations, increase it by 31.5%, and that's how many of you sitting in the room. Our speakers wait till they don't get a date, and if they don't get a date, they show up. I notice a few prominent speakers that aren't here right now that were here last night. I won't name any names. Well, it's been a great time, and I've had the privilege of serving under some just incredible presidents. And it's required a lot of versatility because they have been very different. Starting with a card-carrying atheist, Bill Gove, followed by a 38-year Baptist preacher, Dr. Carl Stevens. Now that took a fast turnaround for me. Bill Gove, by the way, has more love in his heart than most all the religious people I've ever met. You're going to be privileged to hear that man tomorrow. Then they moved a kid in on us, a guy barely in his high 20s. His name's Don Hudson, successful speaker, rich. Had me down to his house for a weekend that Cavett alluded to in Hernando, Mississippi, his modest 38-acre estate. I went down there because I wanted to see his car collection, and I thought they meant toy cars that you get out on the floor. And instead, I'm ushered out to what he calls a barn, which is like a NASA hangar. And in that hangar, in that barn, there are $500,000 worth of exotic automobiles. That was Donnie Hudson, our third president. And then they moved back in an elder statesman, guy that's, of all things, a millionaire brush salesman, former mayor, former lay preacher that became a speaker, and he has a lisp. Can you imagine that? Joe Larson. If you haven't met that man, be sure you meet him. He's here. And then a Midwesterner, little short guy, adding machine salesman, Ira Hayes. This guy spoke under adversity you won't believe. First, he had only one adjective, the word what? See, you can tell who the old-timers were. But and the thing about Ira, how you ever made it on the platform, I'll never know. The guy's given the same talk over 35 years and still has to use flip charts. Those of you who didn't laugh, talk to some of the old guys. Then we got in the religious sense, we got a guy that was really confused. We got our first television star celebrity, Ty Boyd. You're going to hear him tonight if he shows up. Ty Boyd, born, raised Protestant boy, marries a Catholic girl, has 6 or 7 kids. One day Pat said, Ty, because you know TV guys don't spend much time at the station. Ty, you got to get a traveling job. This is it. After 6 or 7 kids. So he did. Then we switched pretty dramatically again. We got our first bearded rabbi president, D. Michael Frank. Mike Frank, I call rabbi with great affection because, of course, the word rabbi is teacher. And I learned more from that man about professionalism and running meetings than a guy should ever be richly enough blessed to learn. And I learned it from D. Michael Frank.
Then poor Don Thorin shows up on the scene. New father, baby child, to reinforce the grown kids he already had. Don Thorin had a lot of adversity because, let me tell you, when the Secretary of Interior, Jim Watt, is your best friend, and Robert Henry is your convention chairman, you got a problem. Well, now Nito is waiting with bated breath. Nito's career in speaking began so uniquely you won't believe it. Picture this. It's on the edge of the River Jordan. And it's a sun-baked day, and they're all sitting, and they're at a positive thinking rally. And Cavett and Zig are the speakers. And suddenly, in the native Arabic, one of Nito's parents said, ha-ah, which in English means aha. I can't do the accent, but they said, we know what we're going to do. We're going to send Nito to America to become speaker. Because his brothers already have all the money in Amman. And Dave Yoho's family has it all in Israel. What we'll do is we will send Nito, who does not yet speak English, to the southern United States, and he'll learn to speak English Southern. Which, of course, didn't happen. Well, that's what it's been like, and it's been terrific. And as Ken McFarland said in 1978, closing our convention, from the old gospel song, yesterday's gone, tomorrow may never come. But we've had these moments today. We've had these moments to hold in our hand as they slip through our fingers like sand. Yesterday's gone, and tomorrow may never come. But we've had these moments today. Thank you.